Right view in the context of spiritual study. Some beginning spiritual practitioners who possess a degree of right view may believe that in keeping with the threefold training, the starting point of spiritual practice is moral conduct, sila, i.e. that spiritual development begins with good behavior, sucharita. This claim, however, misses the core of spiritual practice. The real purpose of spiritual practice at the level of morality, of forming a wholesome disposition and creating wholesome habits, is to enable people who are responsive to training, vinaya, to recognize the true value of moral conduct. Only when one develops a deep understanding of moral conduct, i.e. one develops right view, will one's virtuous conduct be secure. At this stage, one's spiritual practice has truly begun. In other words, the reason why the threefold training begins with moral conduct is in order to nurture the path factors, starting with right view. When the path factors led by right view rise in a person, he or she is said to have begun spiritual training. From this point on, the path factors begin to perform their specific functions and to act in a coordinated way. Besides securing moral conduct, right view leads to sincerity and honesty, and it guarantees that one's behavior accords with the heart and objective of moral principles. One's conduct does not err into an adherence to rules and practices, sila bata paramasa, or into gullibility. When one possesses right view, one can trust in one's virtuous conduct, but if one lacks right view, such self-confidence is absent. From another angle, by focusing on the conditions for right view, one can say that spiritual practice begins with an ability to reflect wisely, yoniso manasikara. This is true because when there is wise reflection, right view naturally follows. Even on the level of moral conduct, when wise reflection helps to guide behavior, one's actions will be correct and perform for useful ends. In addition, one gains understanding, confidence, and joy. Take, for example, the act of dressing oneself properly. Besides considering the value of covering oneself modestly and protecting oneself from the elements, wise reflection also assists in considering the benefits to others and to society. One thinks, I will dress in a clean and tidy way for the well-being of the community or of society. I won't dress in a distasteful or offensive way. I will dress in a dignified and pleasing way to support wholesome mind states in those whom I meet, to make them feel at ease. On the contrary, if one thinks of boasting about one's elegance or social status, of showing off, or of intimidating, seducing, or tricking others, this reveals the lack of wise reflection. The mind will then be dominated by unwholesome qualities. It will be constricted and unhappy, and the act of wearing clothes will be immodest and misguided. When people hear the word study, they usually think of learning required for a specific profession and for earning a livelihood, which in Buddhist practice is a matter of moral conduct, sila. Naturally, no righteous person would approve of a career education that gives no consideration to whether one's livelihood is right or wrong, but an education that aims only at establishing right livelihood without focusing on establishing right view is still not correct, and it is unlikely to fulfill one's wishes, even to the extent of creating right livelihood, because it has not reached the heart of spiritual study. It may lead to right livelihood in name only, not true right livelihood, because it involves a training in moral conduct that does not generate the path factors. It is still superficial and perfunctory. It is not rooted in the Eightfold Path. The correct way is to establish right view as a foundation for right livelihood. It is inadequate to keep moral precepts without having a love for morality, or to perform good deeds without seeing the true importance of virtue. Think of the implausible things that happen in societies in which there is widespread immoral conduct. Many people in such societies see any action that leads to success or wealth, despite it involving dishonesty, deception, and injury to others, as a sign of cleverness and skill. Although there is often material abundance in such societies, there is also much evil doing and crime. In contrast, there are other societies which are relatively impoverished, but in which there is little crime. Some of the poor people in such societies would rather beg for food than commit theft or other bad deeds, whereas beggars in dishonest societies may act unscrupulously even while begging. In the context of formal teaching, this subject matter reveals the important relationship between the Eightfold Path and the Threefold Training, which is evident with these two factors, right view and moral training, the first factors in these two teachings respectively. In terms of the interrelationship between moral conduct and right view, when people live together peacefully and in a well-disciplined fashion, there is an absence of fear and distrust. When one acts virtuously, the mind is untroubled, calm, and concentrated. When the mind is calm and bright, one's thinking is nimble. One discerns things clearly and without bias, giving rise to understanding and wisdom. Wisdom's ability to discern the value of moral conduct is an expression of right view. With right view and right understanding, a person's thoughts, speech, and actions are naturally virtuous. And as mentioned above, training in moral conduct is truly an aspect of spiritual practice, only when it gives rise to right view, at least when one gains a deep appreciation for moral conduct and one sees its value. There are two ways of training in moral conduct that bear fruit as right view. 1. Training in moral conduct, relying on routine behavior and faith. This way emphasizes a code of discipline, of setting up a framework to regulate behavior, and of establishing a specific system, say of a daily routine, in order to create good habits and a wholesome disposition. In addition, one develops faith by having virtuous friends or teachers point out the benefits and blessings of doing good and of following a moral code. Virtuous friends may also introduce one to honourable, successful and happy persons. This may be the friends and teachers themselves, to act as a model for behaviour. In this way, a deep appreciation of goodness, a love of moral discipline, and an enthusiasm for virtuous conduct is generated. Even if one does not have a teacher to point out the benefits of doing good or to act as an example, if one is able to adhere to such moral conduct, having it influence one's habits and disposition, and one sees the benefits of virtue, one will develop an interest in morality and apply reasoning in such a way that accords with virtuous behavior. When one goes beyond simply adhering to a moral code or to moral constraints, and one sees the value of virtuous conduct, one reaches the stage of right view and one's spiritual practice truly begins. This is true despite the fact that one's right view may still be weak and unstable, and one's practice may contain a degree of attachment, naivety, and an adherence to rules and practice. To training in moral conduct using wise reflection. This way emphasizes a thorough understanding of the objectives for actions and for practice. One practices with wise reflection, or one applies wise reflection to guide and direct behavior, as described in the example of wearing clothes above. Here a teacher helps by first pointing out a way of contemplating and understanding the purpose of specific actions. When it comes to practical application, however, the students or practitioners must use wise reflection in each instance themselves. Take it as another example, the act of paying respects to a monk or to an elder. The person paying respects may reflect on the wholesome and appropriate reasons for such an action, considering, for example, I pay respects in order to train myself to be humble and cooperative. I pay respects in order to honour good manners and for the well-being of the community. I pay respects as a sign of reverence for the Dhamma, which is embodied in this person. I pay respects to this person with thoughts of kindness and benevolence to help remind him to preserve virtuous and suitable qualities. Or I pay respect in order to practice the Dhamma in the most beautiful and correct fashion. On the part of the monks, the elders, or the teachers, who are the recipients of such gestures of respect, they may reflect. This is an occasion to take stock whether I possess such virtuous qualities, making me worthy of such respect. I am in a position to offer advice and teachings to this person. Is he acting in a suitable way? I rejoice in this highly virtuous person's conduct. She loves the harmony of the community and venerates the Dhamma. I will follow these worldly conventions. I will do whatever is of benefit to the world. When one reflects wisely in such ways, one gains confidence in one's actions, and unwholesome qualities cease to dominate the mind. Those paying respect, for example, do not compare themselves to another through an impure attachment to self-identity. For instance, by thinking, what does he possess to make him worthy of respect? I am better than him. Why pay respects? And the recipients of veneration need not become mistrustful, offended, or resentful by thinking, why does this person not show respect to me? Why does he not show respect in an agreeable way? They do not get carried away by thinking, people come to bow and pay respects to me, I am so special and excellent. The examples here describe a wise reflection that induces wholesome qualities and gives rise to mundane right view. We can see, however, that this second way of training is more profound than the first way, as it is able to prevent the damage of unwholesome qualities taking hold of the mind. The first way of training in moral conduct is unable to provide this prevention. The second way possesses the confidence of wisdom. It gradually increases the understanding of right view while training in moral conduct, and it defends against a naive and gullible moral conduct that is referred to as an adherence to rules and practices, Sila Bhatta Paramasa. According to the outline of the Eightfold Path, the second way of training in moral conduct is the most correct. Linking this training with the first way described above is likely to lead to even better results, but solely applying the first way is considered inadequate for true spiritual practice. This is because in correct practice in relation to one's surroundings, one begins with training in moral conduct, but in relation to the mind, one must from the very start reflect on things in order to cultivate wisdom and develop right view. Doing this, one incorporates wise reflection. One can be applied at all times in one's life, which can be applied at all times in one's life. One does not hold back and only apply systematic reflection in times of formal contemplation, or only apply it to the context of moral conduct. Such reflection is equally important when developing concentration and wisdom. Right view and the other path factors thus become increasingly proficient and complete. Here one sees the development of the path factors that is linked to the practice of the threefold training from an external perspective, or by considering the major stages of practice. One sees the gradual development according to the threefold training of moral conduct, Shila, concentration, Samadhi, and wisdom, Panya. But when one looks more closely at the details of a person's spiritual efforts, one sees that the path factors are busily engaged. The person continually walks along the path. In sum, for practice to be correct from an external perspective, there is an emphasis on the threefold training, while inwardly a person walks in line with the path. This way, the external systems of training and the internal development of spiritual factors are well integrated. Taking these considerations into account, if one leaves people to develop spiritually on their own in accord with nature, without relying on any social factors for their assistance, there will only be a few prodigies who are able to apply wise reflection by themselves and reach the highest stage of realization. Conversely, if one leaves people to develop solely by way of social influence and control, they will be unable to realize the highest good which is within their potential. Therefore, the following two ways of spiritual development are considered extreme and incorrect. 1. Development left to unfold on its own, naturally and without interference. 2. Development following the control and sway of society. Spiritual development left up to nature is inadequate. One must also foster an understanding of natural phenomena, which leads to a proper relationship to nature. Equally, spiritual development following the dictates of society is also inadequate. One must also gain a thorough knowledge which allows one to escape from the influencing power of society. A complete development involves an interaction with and an understanding of both nature and society, because people are shaped and influenced both by natural and social forces. Such development is nourished by society and by nature, bringing about prosperity and happiness. If people are to live together in peace, even just two people, there must be boundaries and means to regulate behavior. When many people live together, there is a necessity for rules or agreements on behavior, of what should be done and what should be avoided, in order to bring about harmony and safety for each individual. Even an individual person has conflicting desires and requires self-discipline in order to live well. Take the example of numerous drivers arriving at a junction from different directions. Each person is in a hurry and advised to pass first. They thus all get stuck and no one can advance, causing chaos and disputes. If they are willing to lay down a set of regulations, however, everyone can pass comfortably. Likewise, a community or society requires a set of rules. Apart from rules, there is a collection of inherited social systems, customs, traditions, cultural practices, institutions, and a body of technical knowledge, which gives shape to a particular society. These factors shaping society can also shape individuals, instilling them properties that conform with society. At the same time, individuals influence the society. Individual people and the society as a whole are thus interdependent. Nonetheless, when a society has clearly defined shape and form, it tends to become rigid and inflexible, resulting in a one-sided exchange of people being shaped by society in order to meet society's needs and expectations. People, however, do not exist solely to uphold society. Society exists to benefit individuals, and on a fundamental level, it was created for the increased well-being of people. From this perspective, society is only one supportive factor in people's lives, and on its own, it is unable to lead people to a truly virtuous life, because social institutions themselves were created simply to establish a sense of order and discipline. Once people live together in harmony, there is something besides maintaining social integrity which it is incumbent on them to realize. Besides social institutions, people need to pay attention to nature, and the most supreme blessing of life is obtained through the understanding of nature. This is because the truth of life is essentially grounded in nature. Society is simply one supportive factor in people's lives, which can either help to foster an increased intimacy and knowledge of nature, or it can have the opposite effect and cause an alienation from nature. In any case, even though society may have a clear and strictly defined shape, it is not the only factor influencing people. If people are able to apply wise reflection, they can escape from the controlling power of society. Wise reflection enables a person to transcend or see through society and to realize the underlying timeless truth of nature. A person endowed with wise reflection is able to be free from the power of social conditioning, to attain higher levels of virtue, and to return in order to shape society in a fully attentive way. People require a code of conduct in order to live together in harmony. Society thus needs a moral code as well as a compatible set of rules for people to follow. It is true that this moral code can simply become a way to limit people's freedom, or it can even be a way of enslaving people to a system of control. If it is simply a set of prohibitions and rules which people observe by blindly following one another. And it can lead to other ill effects if it is maintained through coercion or deception. Similarly, actions which are allegedly to be free may only be expressions of a mind subject to defilement and suffering. In this case, it is simply a freedom to give expression to mental bondage, freedom to be a slave, or freedom to allow people to be enslaved. This form of freedom involves disenfranchising others in some way or other, directly or indirectly. In contrast, people who are free from the power of mental defilement and who are able to apply wisdom without the obscuring power of social conditioning do not require prescribed moral standards. They are endowed with an inherent moral discipline, and moreover, they are able to comply with any moral code that they recognize as benefiting other human beings. The important link here is that a moral code is a good thing when it is set down and followed with a correct understanding of its objectives. That is, moral conduct must be accompanied by right view. Therefore, when one is teaching children a moral discipline, one must also engender an understanding of the value and necessity of discipline. When laying down rules, regulations, precepts, etc., it is important for participating members to understand the purpose and to give consent, which will prevent them from feeling coerced or ordered about, or from simple blind obedience. Even in terms of existing social systems, customs, traditions, and institutions, it is important to teach each new generation the value of these things. In addition, people should be taught to understand natural phenomena, to discern the world according to truth, which will help them to escape from the power of social conditioning and to reach higher levels of spiritual excellence, which society is unable to provide. Most importantly, society should act as a virtuous friend, Kalyana Mitta, or at least be a place in which one can discover such friends in order to help people train in and develop wise reflection on the subjects just mentioned. There is an important difference between nature and society, which should be taught to people from the time they are children. Namely, nature follows general laws of nature, Dhamma Niyama, whereas human society follows the additional law of volitional action, Kama Niyama. When teaching children, they should be treated with loving kindness, because besides directly showing them kindness in order to foster their well-being, say by making them feel at ease and by promoting long-term mental health, one should also aim to cultivate their faculty of wisdom by leading them to an understanding of wholesome intentions, of goodwill, and of commitment to other human beings. This understanding arises by having children draw a comparison between people and nature. If they have skilled teachers, children will recognize that people are different from nature. Human beings are possessed of consciousness and intention. They are unable to volitionally manage and steer their affairs. They are able to deliberately act well or to act badly. A mother, for instance, does not raise her child simply by natural instinct. She also possesses the human qualities of love, well-wishing, and kind deliberation. And if people treat each other well, this will lead to everyone's happiness and well-being. This is distinct from nature, which is neutral, does not possess faculties of mind, and does not think in good or bad ways. Nature is sometimes gentle and favourable to people, giving them satisfaction and joy. At other times it is violent and destructive, causing pain and suffering. Whichever way it goes, nature is not willful. It does not act out of spite. Nature exists according to its own causes and conditions. In any case, human beings are dependent on nature. We should thus cherish nature and relate to it with an understanding of causality. Moreover, human life is normally subject to a considerable amount of pain due to the unintentional oppressive aspects of nature. We who are endowed with the ability to deliberately choose a course of action should not increase the level of suffering for others. Instead, we should use intention in order to assist others, alleviate their suffering, and show kindness and compassion. When showing kindness to children, one should beware that this kindness does not become an indulgence of their craving. For if one indulges their craving, children will not develop an appreciation of people's wholesome intention. They will not recognize how these kind actions are performed deliberately and intentionally. Moreover, they will fail to understand the contrasting neutrality of nature. Besides failing to nurture loving kindness and a sense of personal responsibility, this indulgence causes further harm to children by allowing unwholesome mind states to breed. Example: selfishness, stubbornness, weakness of mind, greed, and envy. The way to avoid such indulgence is to teach children how to know the distinction between kind and loving actions performed by human beings and the causal dynamics inherent in nature. This way one avoids mistaken expressions of loving kindness which obstruct or impair children's insight into the truth. When educating children, one needs to possess all four of the divine abidings, Brahma Vihara. Besides being firmly grounded in loving kindness, metta, one shows compassion, karuna, when a child is suffering. One acknowledges or rejoices mudita in the child's happiness, or when he or she does something good, or acts with sound judgment. And one is equanimous, upekkha, or looks on with objectivity when the child is acting responsibly and reasonably, or when the child needs to be accountable for the results of his or her actions. This last factor of equanimity, in particular, ensures that loving kindness does not hinder wisdom. Surrounded by natural forces, which are sometimes favourable and sometimes harmful, human life has no true stability. People must struggle to survive. They must find things to sustain life and escape from and remove hostile elements. When one does not truly understand nature, one attaches and devotes oneself to those things one hopes will gratify desire. One sees the world as a place for pursuing sense pleasures, a place to fulfill all one's desires. One views oneself as ruling over the world, and one sees others as obstacles or competitors. This in turn leads to possessiveness, hostility, hatred, contempt, competition, and oppression between people. Moreover, when one does not get what one wants or things later change, this can give rise to intense suffering. When one receives encouragement by a virtuous friend, someone who helps to see the value of loving kindness, one's relationship towards other people and towards nature improves. This, however, is still right view on a mundane level. If one wishes to develop a truly secure understanding, one must also cultivate transcendent right view. This is done by understanding the truth of life and of the world, viz. all things exist according to causes and conditions. All worldly phenomena, lokadhamma, are uncertain and impermanent. They are inherently insubstantial. They are without an essential core, which would make them independent from other phenomena. They cannot be truly controlled, and they cannot give essential meaning to life. We human beings are without a self, which is able to truly control anything else. Our lives are subject to the same laws of nature as other people. Humans and other living creatures are all companions in birth, old age, sickness, and death. We all cherish happiness and are averse to suffering. Moreover, all life is dependent on other life in order to exist. This kind of understanding is fundamental, even for children, in order to know how to correctly relate to the world and to other people. It leads people to change how they give value to things, switching from using craving to using wisdom as the means of evaluation. They recognize what is truly valuable in life and worthy of aspiration. They know how to make their minds free and happy, and they become more skilled at alleviating suffering. This firmly established right view reduces greed, hatred, and delusion, reduces competitiveness and oppression, and reduces moral problems. When right view is established, a person advances towards the goal with the support of several other spiritual factors, as described in this sutta passage. Monks, if it is aided by 5 factors, right view has liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom as its fruit and reward. These 5 factors are 1. Virtuous conduct, sila, behavior free from oppression, 2. Learning, sutta, knowledge gained by listening, study, reading, etc. 3. Discussion, satcha, sakacha, conversing, debating, exchanging ideas, verifying one's knowledge. 4. Calm, samatha, calming the mind, an absence of restlessness and distraction. 5. Insight, vipassana, using wisdom in order to discern things as they truly are. To summarize, right view accords with reality. It refers to seeing things as they truly are. The development of right view requires continual systematic reflection, which prevents seeing things superficially or seeing only the end result of natural phenomena. Systematic reflection helps one inquire closely into things by analyzing the various converging factors and the sequence of causes and conditions within natural processes. It prevents one from being deceived by things or from becoming a puppet that is propelled, convulsive, and manipulated by sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, and popular beliefs, leading to personal and social problems. Instead, one is mindful and fully aware, free, self-confident, and able to determine and act with wisdom.